I have a special guest in the podcast. Isn't he cute? My trusty hound, Malcolm, is in the studio today with me because, well, we didn't want to leave him at home by himself. So he's in his special doggy bed and he's been ever so good. It is the Awake Space, and I am Laurie Rivers, your host, here to help you with some inspiration to get the aspirations out into the world, which means taking aligned action. I'm just protecting it. Things are getting better, but I'm just protecting my thumb because even though I'm feeling better, every time I go to use my thumb, I overuse. So I'm being a good girl. All right. Well, the world is worlding, isn't it? The world is worlding. And here's what I have to say about that. I'm not surprised. I mean, it was in my 2025 head predictions that I wrote in June. But this episode, I don't think we need to talk about the worlding. We need to talk about the youing, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how to stabilize in times of chaos. Now, grounding's one thing, centering is another, and that's our focus here today. We're going to talk a lot about what is changing in the world and how you can navigate it. In the patron only podcast this week, I'm going to give you some strategies for managing through these chaotic times. I mean, we obviously gathered together as a community, and without the patrons of the Awake Space, there is no podcast. But one of the things I can tell you is it's still an inside job. You can't rely on other people to be your stabilizing force. You have to create that within so you can move it without, and not having to tell people you should ground and you should center, and I can't focus if you're blatty blatty blatting. That doesn't work. It doesn't. So you're going to want to make sure you save this episode to listen to more than one time. And if you're in the Patreon, if you're in the Awake Space community, then we're going to be going through some strategies to help you navigate, especially through the next 5-6 weeks. Okay. Because there's a lot of destabilizing energy up, and take away all the gory details, that destabilizing energy would be up anyway because things do need to change. And then I'm going to do some humble bragging. Maybe not humble. I always say humility is for men because women are born humbled. But I got the sweetest note this week from Alexa, who took my summer boot camp last year where I basically info dumped for 4 weeks. It included aligned content creation, marketing magic, how to find your side gig using astrology, a little bit of healing the money wound. I mean, it was kind of like the whole shebangarang. And Alexa sent me a beautiful note telling me how applying the work that I've created has helped in her life. And one of the things I love to say is it's beyond money. Money helps. We all need to pay the bills. Again, I've had a very interesting life and have lived in multiple income brackets. And I like being able to pay my bills. Not being able to do that is very stressful. So money plays a role. Anybody who's saying it doesn't play a role is trying to fool themselves or is more than comfortable and doesn't have to think about it. When we can create quality of life, when we can create a strong sense of self, confidence in our abilities, understanding how to take aligned action so we are reasonably content and have rewarding experiences. It doesn't mean nothing crazy ever happens. Life is always lifing. Having the know-how, the skill set to navigate is incredibly precious. And so that's our focus this week in navigating these very destabilizing times, how to stabilize ourselves. So let's get on with it. Get your tea, get your coffee, get your matcha, get your Red Bull, get your H2O. And whether we're doing the laundry, washing the dishes, taking a hot girl or hot guy walk, getting the cat into the backpack, or taking our dog out to the park, taking the kids to school, driving to work, whatever we're doing it together. And I love it when you guys take me to the gym because I get so in shape. All right, let's get moving. I don't think it's it this month, but you can start getting your hopes up. A friend of mine and I were talking just this morning, Sunday morning, and she said, "You've known about this time for a long time." And I went, "Yeah, since I was in my 20s. People thought I was crazy. I kept warning people that massive systemic change was coming. And they'd be like, well, what does that mean? And I'd say, I don't know. Everything changes. And back in the 90s, the only thing I could think of was, Gen X things. And I'm not going to say it because I don't want you guys to worry about that. There is a potential for things to really escalate out in the world. But there's 7 billion people on this planet. And not all 7 billion people are directly impacted. There are millions of people directly impacted personally from booms and things like that. And economically, we're all impacted as well because the world is changing. The systems are changing. To me, it looked like what happened during the Industrial Revolution. And then I went back and it looked like other points in time of change, all the way back to the Bronze Age. And it really is the biggest change we've seen since the Bronze Age. And from an intellectual level, that's fascinating. On an individual level, it's a WTF. And she was like, how did you manage? And I said, well, I didn't manage with this knowledge very well. I didn't manage very well with this when I was 30. I had 2 little kids and I was like, my God, how do I prepare my children for this? Knowing that if I put them into society as it was, it would not prepare them for what would be, and not knowing exactly how things would transpire. So I made sure they had hands-on skills and life skills because there will always be things we must do for ourselves. And I made sure they understood technology and how to utilize it. All of that was important. I taught them communication skills, especially with themselves. I helped them develop resiliency, which is not strength. It is the ability to bounce back from challenging circumstances. Okay. It is not strength. I've been very disappointed in the psychological community for misusing the term. Because they're like, people don't need to be more resilient. Our nervous systems aren't designed for this. And I'm like, well, in some ways, no. And in some ways, yes. I studied under the founding researcher of resiliency, and that was H. Stephen Glenn, PhD. He was a remarkable man who did his research in the late 60s because he wanted to prevent the school to prison pipeline. Notice whose work got quashed. He was a brilliant man, and he was a world-renowned expert as a psychologist. He was brilliant, and he was kind and compassionate, and I was forever changed working with him. And his work is inculcated into everything I do because that was his life's mission. That was his soul's intent. And he just wanted people to know they had value. And that's like one of my core missions. I can't promise you a rose garden. I can't promise you that things are going to be exactly the way you want it. But every world teacher that has ever had a message has always said, let go of the outcome. Let go of the outcome. Let go of how it happens. Leave room for possibility. We can use frameworks and process to give us an edge. And that's what I provide. Every single person has a unique walk in life. Everyone has a unique set of skills, a unique set of values, a unique set of dreams and hopes and aspirations. And yet we can group people into piles where they share similarities. Astrology is a remarkable tool for that. Unfortunately, in popular astrology, which is most of your apps, most of the books that get published, especially in the last 26 years since the turn of the century, it's been very popular to limit people. But it was common unless you really dug deep and found some really great teachers like Noel Teal, Joanne Wickenberg, Robert Hand. His work is very fascinating. His research is very fascinating. There were people who went deeper but people want to just have an instant answer, and they treat astrology much like a personality test or a typology of some kind. I say, that's who I am. You're looking for who am I? Why am I? Why am I is usually at the core of the who am I question. Why am I here? What am I doing? What's my purpose? Your purpose is to be here and have a range of experiences, and the chart shows the parameters in which those experiences provide the most growth, the most expansion, the route to healing, the route to fulfillment. And in the last 30 some years, we've overemphasized our trauma story. And it was a swing of a pendulum, because before the 90s, you didn't air your dirty laundry. You didn't air the skeletons in the closet. You never opened the closet door. Okay. Because people would pigpile you. You want to know why the Epstein thing is happening now? Because people will talk about stuff. People knew. People knew these guys were dirtbags. They also had acceptable levels of bad behavior because, men are men, they can't control themselves, and women shouldn't be provocative. That was the thinking. Anybody who lived with it, comment below and say amen, because that's the truth of it. It's the truth of it. It's just people get busy with life or they're not paying attention, but this has always been going on. Remember Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill? Seriously. We didn't even have laws against sexual harassment because it was just acceptable to smack somebody on the ass at work. Before I give the Alexa story, because I think it's so powerful, just from lived experience, when I was 17, I worked at a really nice department store called Meyer and Frank's. It was in Portland, Oregon. And the downtown store was amazing, and I got to work downtown when I was 18. But before that, while I was still in high school, I worked at the Clackamas Town Center store because it was closer to where I lived and I was still in school. And I had a job called a flyer, and that meant anywhere that needed help, any department, I would work there. And I really loved the linen and the crystal wear departments and the ladies' fashion. But I also really liked the men's department. And partly because cute guys came in, And I was 17. She wasn't always old. And I had the biggest crush on the manager, who was always appropriate. Always. He was such a lovely human being, and he had a little sister my age. He was Puerto Rican, and he was so handsome and just gorgeous. And so I would be very willing to go work in his department, and I would just be like, okay, I'll go fold things. And I was a very naive young lady. The tism is strong. We just didn't know it. But there was a guy who worked in that department who was a sleazebag. And every time he and I were in that department, and this happened for a few months, if I was ringing someone up at the till, he would walk behind me and grab my behind. That's right, just give my butt a squeeze. And I would wait till the customer went away. I'd go find him and say, hey, don't touch me. And he would do it again. And after a few times, and I didn't work in that department all the time, but I had told him like 3 or 4 times to stop touching my behind. And I had a hair trigger temper. You think I'm spicy now? There's been a lot of personal growth, okay? But anyway, so this man came behind me while I was ringing up this little tiny wizened old lady. In fact, she looked like the old lady from the Wendy's commercial with Where's the Beef. She was like that. She was tiny and barely could see over the counter. And she was buying some nice shirts and a couple ties for her husband, I'm assuming. And as I was ringing her up, he came and got my butt again, but he stood there and held it. And something in me snapped. And you have to remember, I was the straightest arrow you ever met. And I was super naive, but I had a little brother and boy cousins. And I grew up fighting with them. And I looked at her, and it was so funny. I went, one moment, please, Libra moon. One moment, please. And I took my hand and reflexively went between his legs, grabbed as hard as I could, looked over my shoulder and said, "Do you want me to twist or squeeze? I told you not to touch my butt." And then I was mortified. He called me crazy, ran out with a yelp. I looked at her and I said, "Ma'am, I apologize. I was so rude in front of you." And she is cackling. And she goes, "No, honey, you just made my day. If I could tip you, I would." And so I rang her up real fast and I ran to HR and I told them what happened. And I said, I'm sure you're going to fire me. And luckily, because my mother had worked at the store for a very long time and she had moved up at that point, she was still there, but she had moved up from scrubbing toilets up into payroll. She was a really good worker and she's really smart and worked her way on up. And so they'd watched me grow up. And yes, that is a privilege, and I know it. But both Jody and Mark, Jody was in charge of HR, and Mark was the head of that department. And they were like, "He did what? That's not okay. He shouldn't be doing that to anybody." And I was very lucky to not be blamed. I was very lucky to be supported. That was commonplace. And the sad thing is it did take them knowing my mom or I was a good girl. If I wore my makeup a little differently, if I had dressed a little differently, if I wasn't as well spoken, another girl might have lost her job. That was 1986. And I don't think we tell enough of these stories, right? She's always been a spicy meatball. But it was those experiences as a young person and then being told they weren't hiring women when I lived in the UK. That was fun. That was 1990. Being told I was overqualified, which obviously looking out into the world, they weren't hiring very qualified people to make decisions. That I really began examining what was okay, what was norms, what was acceptable, and how to be authentically myself. I was very embarrassed. I grabbed his in between his legs. I was very embarrassed. But I was just done, you know. And I wasn't normal as compared to a lot of my peers. Now we know I'm neurospicy, but I was always looking for examining what makes a person tick. And of course, college came and got educated in anthropology beyond international relations. I also studied cultural anthropology. I was forced to take quantum mechanics theory at my university. I didn't want to, changed my world. Understanding human beings, human behavior, studying with H. Stephen Glenn. And then, of course, astrology came in between going to college, going and doing graduate work, getting to H. Stephen Glenn. And it gave me a framework to look at human beings. It gave me data sets to work with. And I realized it wasn't a determinism, especially since the quantum physics. It wasn't a determinism. Rather, it showed a spectrum of expression. And in the old books, they'd say evolved, unevolved, or positive and negative. And I was like, but when you look at light broken up into a prism, do some color theory, or when you're looking at music, you have the octaves. But if you listen more intently, you know, there's many layers to the spectrum of a C note. You have a C sharp, a C flat, you have major and minor, you have, you know, your lower octaves, you've got your higher octaves, and you have everything in the middle. So I realized Aries expresses in this fan of possibility, and Taurus expresses in this fan of possibility. And then you have the sun and the moon, Mercury, Venus, they have their fans of possibility. And instead of a typology of you are destined for this, I saw where it gave us the ability to understand how to use our free will and our agency. And that is at the core of everything I teach. Whether it's healing the money wound, using your astrology. And I realized people were getting hung up on the astrology. So what did I do last fall and into January? I rewrote everything into plain language. Everything. Giving a framework for healing and a framework for taking action that's aligned and centered in self. And when you're a mad scientist, sometimes you wonder, I know it's working. I've seen the changes in people's lives. And I often don't talk about it because I'm socialized female as well, as spicy as I am. Imagine being told, don't brag, don't brag, don't brag, don't brag. I know I'm one of the best astrologers in the world. I have a track record to prove it. No one is 100% accurate. Anyone claiming to be 100% accurate is a liar because that is statistically impossible. But I do run 87% correct. Go ask your AI on any kind of analytical field that does forecasts and projections what an 87% accuracy rate is, because it's very high. And I run up as high as 92%, but I'll stray and be humble a little bit, but for certain 87% accurate. But when it comes to the impact it has on people's lives, when they do the work, and I can't make people do it. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So people have to take action using these frameworks. But when they do, it's magic. And Alexa sent me this beautiful note, and I'm going to read it. So she did the whole business boot camp. She's coming to my workshop this weekend, too. I saw the sign up, Alexa. Here is her testimonial. This past summer, I had the privilege of taking Laurie's business boot camp, and it fundamentally shifted how I see both my work and myself. 1 month after her class, my business tripled. The month after that, it tripled again. Laurie's teachings helped me understand myself on a deeper level. How I want to move through the world, how I want to show up in my life and my work. I cannot thank you enough, Laurie, for sharing the framework on how to live life with presence and for showing me how to realize myself and my potential. The clarity gained has touched every arena of my life, and I very much look forward to the continuance of coming home to myself over and over and over. Wow. I'm not going to lie. I cried first time I read that, because it's one thing to create structures for people and another to see the results. And whether as a parent, it was watching my children develop and come into themselves and find their confidence, or my students and my clients, that's my drug of choice, is watching people grow, watching people find out how precious they are, not because I say so, but because they know so. And this weekend, in your natural income path, everybody's going to get the Finding Your Side Gig workbook. It's 192 pages and it's very methodical, and you can just work on that. But that 3-hour workshop, I'm going to dive into understanding how to draw up and out your value, what people may be willing to exchange for with you, why you're valuable, what is the value people see in you. Because it may not be what you think. It may not be what you think. And so that we're diving into that so that you can align more, especially in times of change and chaos. And especially if you're already in the Awake Space community, the Patreon, I've got a drop coming out on the 12th, which is a class I taught 2 or 3 years ago. I think 2 years ago. I just went through my Zoom story. I forgot I taught a lot of classes. Okay. I knew I taught beginning astrology. I knew I taught healing the money wind. I knew I taught intermediate astrology, which we're pretty much doing in the astrology crew at this point. But anyway, I forgot about this class. It's called Unlock the Secrets of Your Birth Chart. And this is where I'm giving you the progressive evolutionary astrology lens of understanding that spectrum of expression, the 3 layers of consciousness I talk about, which is your instinctual consciousness, your social conditioning, and your deliberate consciousness. It's an hour and like 45 minutes. of really juicy stuff, and we're going to all watch it together on the 12th of March at 5. The time is going to be in your time zone. If you go to the Patreon, you'll see that. I'll put a link in the show notes. If you're not a patron, you'll have to wait till it's over and you can purchase it. But it's free for patrons at the $15 level and up. Anyway, if you're a patron, you get access to this. If you're at the magazine level and up, it is good stuff. You don't want to miss it. Alrighty. So we're going to talk a little bit about astrology and AI and how you can navigate a very dynamic and changing employment space, because people are rightfully worried about executives making decisions to lay off employees in favor of using AI. I'm going to talk a little bit about that coming up. I don't think it's it this month, but you can start getting your hopes up. Oh my goodness. Malcolm decided to sit on my lap. So you get a rare sighting because he doesn't normally, you can tell he doesn't like to be on camera. So, but anyway, this is my good old boy, Malcolm. He's 14 and he's a terrier mix and he's the cutie tootiest and he's going to cuddle on mom's lap for a bit. So anyway, I was looking up AI and I know the resources, the water usage, all of that. That's horrible, but it's not going to go away any more than cell phones have gone away or computers have gone away. Vehicles haven't gone away. And the one thing I know from living a life that has seen a great amount of change in technology, and my great grandmother saw far more than I, because she was born in 1899 and she saw it all come in. If we fight it, it doesn't change it. It doesn't make it go away. If we fight it, it doesn't change it and it doesn't go away. So we need to know how to navigate times and how to create our stability going forward. Well, I've had a lot of people say, "Are you worried about AI and astrology?" And I'd be like, "No, because AI can't do what I do. It doesn't have my brain." Okay? It can right now it's aggregating a bunch of pig slop and people are getting misinformed, but the people who want what I got are out there, and that's why I have a thriving practice. In fact, so much so, I can't possibly read for every client one-on-one that wants a reading and get my books written and do the podcast and play with Malcolm. You're so cute. But anyway, I was just torturing myself over that because the mediums, the psychics out there, they can do groups. In general, astrology is like a workshop teaching astrology, but when you get to the advanced stuff, not that many people make it that far to the very advanced concepts. And I thought, how can I help people? And I figured out a way to do groups. So if you're an existing client, keep your eye on your inbox, including your spam, because I'm going to be reaching out to let you know about my 10 to 12 person groups. It's a minimum of 10 people, maximum 12. And I figured out a way to do it. And it's cost effective for you too. But there's also the astrologers at wokeastrology.com. And you guys heard a clip last week and the astrologers roundtable. Pardon my laptop camera. I was at home and I didn't have my good camera on me. But anyway, we did another astrologers roundtable. And if you want to get to know them as people, check that out. It's a free post in the Patreon. You don't even have to sign up with an email. But anyway, let's talk about the AI. When I was doing my research on this, I got these very glib answers like, well, it's just replacing data entry and the grunt work. And I was like, well, there's a lot of people who do that work. There's a lot of people who do the grunt work. I thought that was kind of a shitty way of putting the amount of job losses. And I was like, this is why I teach entrepreneurism. This is why I teach people to understand their value, their talents, their skills. And no, not everybody's going to be a content creator. And no, not everybody's going to be a service provider. Not everybody is going to want to be in business for themselves. And so I was sitting and examining this. And to me, I think besides the environmental impact, the greatest threat is actually the executives making the decisions because they're freaking sociopaths. They're not thinking about the economic impact that all those job losses make. They're not even thinking about their own bottom line at that point. Because anyone half on economics can sit and show how each job loss impacts the economy, not just locally, but nationally and globally. A temporary boost to your bottom line is not necessarily a good long-term plan. But I doubt those people are listening to this podcast. So I can't change them, but I can help you. And that's my goal. That's why I teach these things. I didn't start a business because I wanted to be a business person. I hated the word business. It's just the economy sucked. I had kids. We weren't seeing a raise in our household. There were no good jobs around that would pay decently. And I thought, well, if I'm going to make shitty money, I might as well work for myself because I didn't want to put my kids into the childcare that was available. I didn't have any family around to help, neither side. Not my then husband, not me. And there was no more notches in the belt. You couldn't tighten it. So I was like, all right, how do I bring more in? And like many people, I thought, oh, I need a product. So a lot of people, like right now, they're being middlemen and selling on TikTok. If you can do that, I think that's a great way to build cash flow. I don't necessarily think it's a long-term strategy, but it's a good short-term strategy. By the way, I didn't have very much money, remember? That's why I had to bring more in. And so I started leveraging the internet. That was 2005. Let me tell you, coding a PayPal button. Oh my God, the meltdowns I had making sure that worked. And when it worked, and I made my first 69 cents off a keychain, I danced around my living room because not about the 69 cents, but that the damn button work that took forever. And so Malcolm's on my lap. There he is. So if you see my hand, I'm petting his ears. But anyway, I wouldn't fear, but I would prepare and I would skill build. And in my research on AI, I posed some questions. I was like, hey, essentially it goes down to being a good storyteller because people will still need employees. Even though we use systems. I mean, we already have automations. When you get a reminder before your astrology session with me, I didn't send that email. My assistant didn't send that email. My system sent that email. It's set up for that. The same with the text messages. I'm not sitting and texting everybody. No. I trashed my wrist or my thumbs doing other things, using a bad trackpad. But anyway, we still need people to interact with. And we need people who are aligned with us and people with skills. And the way we're going to connect with those people is the ability to communicate ourselves to other people. The storytelling that makes human beings human. Being able to relate, being able to convey empathy, compassion, or matching values. Not everybody's going to be an empathetic person. Not everybody's going to be compassionate. But also people who have very strong, they like to call them the soft skills. I hate that term. I love calling them tactical skills, interpersonal communication, inside of you communication, being able to be accountable, responsible, showing up on time. Systemic skills, understanding how systems work. And that could be how a government system works, a computer system works. In my world, it's showing up to a meeting if you're working for me, understanding basic netiquette is one of the needs in the system I run. It could be a lot of things. Judgmental skills, and that's not being judging of yourself but being able to make decisions, not having to be told every little thing, being able to understand what is necessary. I'm not saying you need to be a mind reader, but if there's a schedule and the person you're working for has a pretty clear outline of what they need doing, asking okay before you do something on the to-do list or the schedule probably isn't helping out. So somebody who can do that is going to be valuable. Building your own confidence. Confidence isn't arrogance. Knowing what you're good at, knowing what you're not good at, not going for jobs you can't do. Those are all very important things that need to be cultivated. They were important before. They are absolutely essential now. There is always going to be the need for human connection. And to the people who identify as women, and especially the ones who are socialized as women, in my audience, you need to value the labor you do. We've been taught that a lot of what we bring to the table isn't that important. The soft skills, women's work gets paid less, the caretaking. And think about it, you may not even be in a caretaking role, but you're still the office mom. That's value. We put mom down, right? And second wave feminists didn't do us a lot of favors because they were still operating off of patriarchy. I'm also not blaming them. You have to have stepping stones. And so it's like, oh, you're just a mom. I remember when I came back to the States with my kids and somebody went, you're that educated and you're just a mom. And I was like, I exercised my choice to raise the human beings I chose to have. I had a choice. I exercised my choice. And I wanted to raise my children. And the United Nations studies from the 1990s actually showed that an educated mother was a better mother. And maybe if we were valued, not our whole value being as a mother, but it being part of who we are, because we are intricate beings and multifaceted. We're not just one thing. If you're an accountant, you're not just an accountant. So understanding your actual value is important. There are intrinsic and intangible things that can be made tangible. Whether you're a consultant, a coach. But the problem is, and I know because I went through coach training back in 2012, which I already had those skill sets from working with H. Stephen Glenn, but I wanted a newer piece of paper. And here's what these coaching schools would do. They'll be, and we'll teach you how to start your business. They didn't. I'd already had a business. And I was like, that's not a business. That's not even a business plan. Build your website and they will come do some Facebook ads, blah, 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 have your signature service, but they didn't teach people how to do it. And even the online gurus, and this is why I became a business coach, the online gurus would say, write an ebook, but they wouldn't tell you how. They wouldn't tell you how. They'd just say, go do it. Start a podcast, they'd say. Well, if you don't know how to do it, how do you start? And so I started teaching classes on how to create a signature program, how to write an ebook, how to take one idea and make it into many products. And that's why when I decided to go public as an astrologer, which, by the way, I've always had clients. I was referral only and doing just fine, thank you very much. But when I decided to go public, I was able to build the infrastructure because I had all those other skills. Sometimes it takes a while to find the thing that just really aligns. For me, it was having to split my identity and have 2 feet in different worlds. That held me back. And honestly, it was timing too. The world was not ready for somebody who was a world-class astrologer and a business consultant. Oops, it wasn't. And it wasn't where I lived, especially up in Washington State at that time. Things started to change around 2016, 2017. Understanding your strengths, your skills, and your abilities are the key, and the ability to tell the right story. And not everybody, like I said, not everybody wants to be a solo operator or found an empire. A lot of people like being support people or being part of something or want the freedom in their schedule to do other things. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes it's life stages. Everybody has a unique pathway. In the patron only podcast this week, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more and give you a little more depth in how I see it as a progressive evolutionary astrologer. Especially when we're looking at these times in AI, you have to be able to tell your story in a very different way than most people think of telling their story. So there's that. All right, I'm going to do some community news and talk about what's coming up in the Patreon this week and give some of our newest members big thank yous. And I promise I'll be good. I won't bring up bananas. And if you know, you know. All right, that's coming up next. And then we're going to wind up the episode kind of talking a little bit more about that Mercury retrograde and what you can do before the 20th of March when it stations direct, because this is good energy to be using as we move through the world. I don't think it's it this month, but you can start getting your hopes up. So one of the ways I run my own personal schedule is kind of based off my own astrology. I understand my ebbs and my flows of energy, and it's always right around the end of Pisces season, the beginning of Aries season, that I start gearing up, teaching more workshops, offering more out to you guys. My energy tends to be lower at the Christmas, and I tend to take quite a bit of that time to work on things for this time of year moving through the summer. And that's why we're going to be doing the workshop on March 14th. That's not in the Patreon, but if you are a patron at the $15 level and up, you have priority tickets. A bunch of you have already signed up and made use of those special savings. Make sure you do that this week because we do that workshop on March 14th. I'm very excited about it. What else is coming up? On the 12th, we've got Unlocking the Secrets of Your Birth Chart. That was a class I taught. It's an hour and 45 minutes long. And we're going to be doing a drop together on the 12th in the evening. And that means there's live chat. So that'll be super fun. I look forward to doing that with you guys. Took out the Q&A section. Thank you, Alicia, my assistant, for doing that for me. Doing good, guys. We're doing good. We got so many amazing people. I want to remind you this podcast is 100% listener supported. Something I'm very, very proud of. Thanks to the members of the Awake Space community. And thank you guys for getting a hold of Patreon and telling them that we lost our pictures and we want our gifts back. Like, I got to get a hold of them because somebody said the response was, it's like just mine. Just mine has been impacted, according to somebody who was checking it out with support. I'm like, what do you mean it's just mine? They just did an app update. I'm like, talk about holy Mercury retrograde. Anyway, so we've got the Unlocking the Secrets of Your Birth Chart drop on the 12th. If you're in the astrology crew, you can come in as a beginner because I have resources that kind of stretch the advanced beginner phase all the way up into the intermediate level, advanced intermediate. We're doing aspects right now, aspects to the natal chart. March 21st, so 2 Saturdays out, we're doing aspects to and from Mars in the natal chart. I'm excited. We've done the sun, the moon, Mercury, and Venus, and now we're on to Mars, which is very exciting. You guys have like over 40 hours of classes in a library there. Have fun with that. Also, coming up this week, if you are in the mystery school tier, which is no longer published, but it exists. If you're in the mystery school tier or in the astrology crew, we've got a hot seat coming up on March 10th in Laurie's test lab. It's a test lab because I'm testing out the tech and building things out for the full version of the work I'm doing, the framework for rebuilding confidence, value, and wealth. Whether you're doing The Work TM by Laurie Rivers, or you're doing Healing the Money Wound, or all the other goodies that I'm bringing out into the world. That book, I should have my proof this week to look at it. I'm excited. But anyway, so that's what's going on right now. I don't give you a super hard schedule for live streams in the test lab on any of the work, the ANI process that helps you develop an authentic life, an integrated life and business or career. Those will be scheduled. That's a little different, but our chatties, I don't schedule those. Those show up when I'm like, my spidey senses are tingling, or, ooh, there's a disturbance in the force. So it could be multiple times a week. It could be once a week. It just depends. We'll do another one this week because I'm sure there's more than one disturbance in the force coming up. Let's thank our newest members. We've got Laurie, DP, Frey, Nolani, Kat, Nat, Heather, Dora, Sarah, Mayro, Brittany, Lisette, Scarlett, Amethyst, Lindsay, Annie, Asena, Nicole, Venus, Venusian Blind, Bird Nester, Samantha, No Way Jose, Autumn, Patience, Sarah, Jackie, Melly, Malin, Shania, Artimo, what a beautiful name, Artimo, Jay Mintz, Jackie, Layla, oh, Jillian, I should be wearing my other glasses, Jillian, Stephanie, Yo-Yo, Leah, Mel, Egot, Sara Bobara, Alina, Justin, Kelly, Laura Beth, Beatrice, Peach, Sarah, Lore Master 3000, Megumi, Jennifer, Vicky, Melissa, Jackie, Kara, Gray, and Jenny. Thank you guys so much. Without you, there is no podcast. We've got thousands of people between the free and supporting tiers, supporting the work of the Awakened. I am totally appreciated of our vibing members. I'm trying to make one live stream a month that everybody gets to come to, so make sure you're doing that. And I'm trying to get more articles out, etc. Pardon the thumbs. But anyway, without you, there is no me. I appreciate you. And this is how we show our interdependence, our interconnectivity, and it's how we make our difference in the world. So if you aren't a patron, I invite you to join. All right, let's talk a little bit about how to make the most of the rest of this Mercury retrograde that we've got and why it's actually doing us a whole lot of favor. I don't think it's it this month, but you can start getting your hopes up. March 20th, not only does the sun enter Aries, Mercury's direct. So it makes its station for direct motion on the 20th. We've got about 11 days to make use of the Mercury retrograde energy. And I know everybody loves to catastrophize Mercury retrograde, but honestly, it can be a very effective and efficient time. It's just not a time to go barreling forward with something new. It is time to tidy up loose ends, get your I's dotted and your T's crossed. It's a time to look at your paperwork, get it all together, to review your paperwork. It's a time to work on projects if you've got a honey-do list and things you haven't got to. That's the time to do it. I talked about this in the Mercury Retrograde Survival Guide. You can check that out on the Tube of You on my Laurie Rivers channel. And because I read from the article from the February magazine where I gave you some strategies. But let's talk a little bit about as we move through the rest of this week. It's a really good time to do some self-evaluation, not in a judgmental way, okay? You want to review the story you're telling. And with Mercury retrograde, both the retrograde and the Pisces involved means we're having a little bit more of Virgoan energy. So we want to focus on ourselves on a healing level. Virgo is the healer. I know everybody thinks about small animals. I know people think of the great organizational skills, but Virgo is the healer. It's the harvest maiden, but it's also the healer. And so often we tell stories because we're human. That's what humans are best at, is the storytelling, both to others and ourselves. And you'll be like, I'm not good at telling stories, Laurie. That's a story you're telling yourself. They used to say it was prehensile thumbs, but there's a lot of animals with prehensile thumbs. Anybody with raccoons getting into their chicken coop can tell you that. The stories we tell ourselves and other people matter. And so many of us have been living through this time, and I talked a little bit about it in the opening, that We tell our trauma story and we really lean into that because that garners temporary visibility, but it's not lasting visibility. It's a damaging thing to create our trauma story as our identity. And I know I did it. I did it. I always say there's like 5 years I'd like back because although that 5 years of time propelled me into creating all the things that I now teach, it's better to tell the story of overcoming. It's better to tell the story of our value and our strength. The wonderful and incomparable Mel Brooks, the great comedian and filmmaker on American Masters on PBS, if you get a chance to look it up, go do that. He jokingly, but not jokingly, said, I just kept telling people I was wonderful until they believed me. My mom said I was wonderful. Why wouldn't I be? Now, that's a great example of being raised to believe you're wonderful. A lot of us didn't always experience that in our childhoods. And so we're like, well, my mom didn't say I was wonderful, so I'm screwed. No, no, no. Tell yourself you're wonderful. Tell yourself till you believe it. Notice what he said. I said it over and over again until people believe me. We have to tell the stories over and over and over again for ourselves to believe them, that they are true. And so often, and because of like daytime television, interview shows, people will hear about the struggles somebody went through and overcame. You get all the salacious details, all the gory details. And that's where the emphasis is instead of the overcoming. When we're talking to ourselves, we need to not be toxically positive, but be reinforcing of that which we want more. Who am I on the other side of this? And sometimes we don't know, right? If you're in the thick of it, it's hard to know. But I remember sitting in my car, having a good cry, drinking a cup of coffee. And this is many years ago now. This may be like 2008, 2009. And my therapist had asked me the question, who do you want to be on the other side of this? And I just looked at him and I went, I can't conceive of who I can be. All I know is this. And I was in a very painful spot. It was probably actually more like 2007, because that's where I was really in that pain spot. And I didn't really know. So I sat in my car and I cried for a while and I drank my mocha. My mocha. So my auntie used to say it that way. Have a mocha. But I was sitting there and I was like, who am I after all of this? What am I doing? Well, and I was really focused more on the doing than the being. Well, I'll go get a job. I'm really good with computers. I'll go work in tech, I'll go do these things. And I was having a hard time. And then I'd think about it and be like, I don't really like working in an office building with fluorescent lighting. I really don't. I never did. I was just good at it. And what would that work be? And how would I show up? And I contemplated, and I didn't have the answers that day. Guess what? Those answers don't show up in one flash of insight. They don't show up overnight. And I think people want just to add water, or they think there's something wrong with them if they don't have the answer. But how are you supposed to have it? You were never taught to know it. Not in school, not in university, not even if you studied psychology, because the premise is you are broken, and you are not broken. You adapted. You adapted to social conditioning. You adapted to environmental conditions. You adapted to family structures and patterns, but you are not broken. Maybe you didn't fit into those. Maybe the dynamic is different than works best for you. Still doesn't make you broken. It means that you adapted into a system and a structure that doesn't work well for you. That does not make you the problem. It does not make you broken. It means you adapted. And the good news about adaptation is you have the ability to adapt again. But just like those original adaptations, you have to take time building the other route. So just like when they're building an overpass, there has to be other exit routes off the freeway, or when they're doing repairs on it, right? There's another route. When you're building that other route, it takes a minute. It takes a minute. Be gentle on yourselves. That's why I created the work, because it's a 12-module process that teaches you how to be a neutral observer of self without judgment. And you will still be a judgy McJudgerson to yourself. I still am. I was giving the example last night in our Q&A, and I said, well, I had this reminder that I was not kind to my body, and I've been calling myself a dumbass. But notice it's not stopping me from doing anything, and it is affectionate. You dumbass, right? I'm not being like, I'll never do anything again because I'm so stupid I hurt myself. That's not it. It's just like, come on, you know better. It's still judgment. Again, it hasn't ended my work. I've had to adapt how I use these cute little fingers with the new nail polish. Look at that. It's a really cool cat's eye. It's polychromatic. It's really cool. It's dusty rose, and then it kind of turns into kind of a goldy green. It's like having Black Hills gold fingernails. Okay, which is cool. But anywho, it's important to be able to communicate who you are first to you and then in the outer world. And I'm going to give some tips and hints in the patron only podcast to give people just an idea of what it is we do in the work and how to see ourselves in a different lens. So today, as we talk about this Mercury retrograde period with Mercury representing Virgo and energy, instead of detailing all the ways you're broken and wrong, look for what is going right. It doesn't have to be huge. It could be one small thing. Look at what you're good at. Look at not what needs improvement, but what you've done well. And you say, but that's hard, Laurie. Yeah, because you were trained to make it hard. You adapted to a story that said it had to be hard. If you were writing a new story, how would you put it? Because you get to be the author of your life, whether you believe so or not. Nobody's an NPC. Everybody's the main character of their own story. And sometimes you play a side character in someone else's. Sometimes you're the villain. Sometimes you're the plucky best friend. Sometimes you're the person who gives directions on the side of the road. Sometimes you're the NPC in somebody else's experience. And you're the main character, always in your own story. When we do character development, an astrology chart is the perfect place to start. Instead of going, well, I don't like this placement about myself, and I don't like this, and I don't like that. Tough. You don't get to ignore your placements. They are the makeup of who you are. But energy expresses in a spectrum, not just positive and negative. There's not just harsh aspects and the gentle aspects. Let me tell you, a trine can hand you your ass. And a square could be one of the most productive aspects. That's why I like to call them supporting and creative. So supporting would be the benefics, and creative are the quote unquote malefics. But it takes the right mindset to be able to access that layer of consciousness. But this is the time to assess what is right about you. What are you really good at? Like in the doing, are you a good listener? Are you good at telling a story? Or, what software can you use? Are you a dog whisperer? Are you the one person who can get a cat to do what you need it to do? That is an exceptional skill. If so, are you really good at baking? Are you really good at making a salad? Do you have what are your special interests? Because we tend to be good at those. We may not be as good as we want to be, but that doesn't mean we're not good at it. You want to lean into your strengths because you want to be able to communicate them to yourself, not just other people, right? You got to do it to you first, and then you can tell the stories out loud. And we're always communicating the story. You might think maybe you got caught up in the, oh man, I want to quit the 9-to-5 grind and I want to be a business owner. And then you found out you don't do well working by yourself. Maybe you want to have collaborators to work with or teammates to work with. Or maybe you realize you're not into collaborations and you like doing stuff on your own and you need support people. Knowing what you're best at and then the support needs you have, that's the story you tell. Going back to the trauma story, If you're a content creator, a lot of people will lead with that. And I did it too. Especially once I hit 0 clinical markers. I was trying to like tell people, hey, look, I went through all this crappy stuff and I was very specific but I got here. You can get here. If I could, you can. The diagnosis was so severe and I'd been through all these horrible things. And you know what people focused on? The horrible things. They never once focused on the miracle of healing. The miracle of healing, which wasn't a miracle. It was a step-by-step process I created for myself to fix my nervous system. And I had a PhD psychologist monitor my work. I learned to tell the story of the final outcome. Who did I become once the trauma was healed? Who is the healed version of self? Well, somebody who has really good boundaries. Somebody who really cares. Somebody who took the time to build processes and frameworks for myself and then share with others. I'm still an empathetic human being. I'm still a compassionate human being. I didn't need the trauma to ever be that. I was born that way because I remember pre-trauma. By the way, trauma doesn't always mean you don't remember your childhood. Some of us remember every excruciating detail. Super fun. But how to live forward and be in presence. I embrace everything. I laugh more. I love more. I accept love more. I am unwilling to settle for less. I'm unwilling to compromise who I am. That's the healed version. Who are you on the other side of that? And it takes a while. Don't feel pressure, but this is the perfect time to kind of review, not the trauma, but your strengths, your value, what you're good at, what systems you know. And that could be, I'm really good at school systems. I'm really good at social work. I'm really good at understanding all the red tape. I'm the person who knows all the permits. I'm the person who knows my way around supply chain. I'm the person who understands networking. I'm the person who understands how the library systems work or the publishing system. There are systems everywhere. And you have a greater chance of success when you understand a system than when you walk into a system without understanding. So that's what you want to focus on during this Mercury retrograde. All right. Malcolm has grunted disapproval at me speaking while he's napping. And I think this is a good place to end the Awake Space podcast for March 9th, 2026. If you are in the Awake Space, make sure you tune in to the Patron-only podcast to get more step-by-step help and understanding how to find that stability within amongst the chaos.